Well, welcome to the Introduction to AutoCAD. And this is kind of a survival AutoCAD tutorial here. And so to begin with, we actually need to get AutoCAD. And to do that, you need to go to the Autodesk website, autodesk.com/education/free software. Or you can just Google free AutoCAD for students or something like that. And what you'll find, first of all, there is a lot of free software from Autodesk, so hang on to that login. And there's AutoCAD, AutoCAD for Mac, and AutoCAD Architecture. Now, what we're going to be covering is AutoCAD if you're running Windows, or AutoCAD for Mac. And you should definitely use the installation that's appropriate for your computer. I'm not going to go through the exact installation process, but when you log into the Autodesk website, and you'll have to use your student ID to get the freebie software, otherwise you have to pay. And I've got here the AutoCAD for Mac page. What you'll find is that there are a number of different versions of AutoCAD that are available for download. I usually recommend just getting the latest one, partly because they are meant to run with the latest drivers, and most operating systems update their drivers. If you're running Windows, obviously this will have Windows options, and most Windows machines, certainly laptops, are 64-bit. And probably English, although you don't have to. And what you'll find is that you get a serial number. I forget, it's good for quite a while, a couple of years actually. Usually most students will update every year. Now, let's take a look at AutoCAD. I'm starting it up, and I'll start here going over the Mac interface because I have a Mac. But then I'll go and show you the Windows interface as well. So first of all, there's usually a splash screen that has your most recent documents. You can tell it to display that at startup, or you can tell it not to display that at startup. It's entirely up to you. And you can open a file, obviously, just by clicking the open button. First of all, for our purposes here, we're going to use an existing drawing, and we're just going to make some basic modifications to learn how the software works, the basics of editing, and also creating new objects, and annotation, and finally printing. That's our big goal. And these skills will translate to other programs. You'll find that when we go to SketchUp, the object creation and editing skills are very, very similar. So keep that in mind as you're learning. These are skills which will translate to other programs. All right, so first of all, there is this main part of the screen. The central part of the screen is the drawing area. And every editing and drawing and modeling software operates in a pretty similar way. Some of them divide the screen into fours with different views of your 3D model. In this case, AutoCAD can do 3D, but most people use it as a 2D drawing program. And that's how it began back in 1982, I believe, as a 2D drafting program, and really remained primarily 2D up until the 2000s, early 2000s. Okay, so this is the drawing area. It is black with very faint white grid lines, which you can turn on and off, and you can control how bright they are and how they are spaced out. You'll also see this XY here in the corner. This is what's called the origin of all things. It is, if you're thinking in terms of geometry, it's the intersection of the X and Y axes. X and Y, when they intersect, that is 0, 0. And you can specify coordinates, polar coordinates that way. Anyway, on the left, you'll see there is a toolbar filled chock-a-block with buttons, and it says drafting here, and these are all tools which you use for drafting. It's subdivided into smaller panels. Each of these can be opened or closed by clicking the arrow, which is over here. And you can also customize each by clicking the little cog, and you can control what's in there. So you can really tweak it to be tools that you use most frequently. I will say that this semester I am going to emphasize typing in commands, using the keyboard to enter your commands. So for example, if you want to draw a line, you could click on the line tool, but what you'll also find is that when I highlight this tool, it says command:"line." That command is telling you that's what you need to type in if you want to draw a line. This is much easier when you're working on a laptop because now you could hide these tools or get rid of this toolbar entirely if you want, and that gives you more screen space, which is absolutely critical in your laptop. Okay, the top bar is the kind of standard, I don't know, file management tool, save, open, close, go to the next document, printing, that sort of thing. Also managing references. AutoCAD uses what are called external references, where you can have someone else working on a drawing, but you can insert their in-progress drawing into your drawing and make reference to it without actually being able to edit it. For example, a structural grid from a structural engineer might show up in your drawing, and you can use it to reference so that you can align your, say, interior partitions. Okay, so that's the main toolbar. These up here, these words are what's called the drop-down menus. Most of the tools that we see here are also over here and can also be accessed by typing in. So there's a lot of duplication, and what some people will do is run their computer, their AutoCAD, in a sort of clean screen mode where all of that stuff disappears and it's basically all black and white drawing area. Here I have no tool palettes, no menus, no nothing. And I can still type in commands just using the keyboard. If you want the menus back, you can just hold your mouse up at the top, and there they are. I'm going to leave these menus up for now so that everybody can see what we're doing. But in the future, feel free to go in clean screen mode. It's awfully nice when you're working on a smaller screen. Okay, finally, I have over here on the right some default panels. This is the Layers menu. AutoCAD is very dependent on what are called layers, which are kind of like sheets of tracing paper. And I'll just click on this down arrow, and you can see there's a lot of layers, and many of them are labeled in a way which is very clear. For example, this one is labeled Doors. We can probably guess that all the doors are drawn on that layer, or at least they should be. You should always follow these layer management discipline. Also, objects are colored by their layer, which you can see here. If I zoom in, this kind of sepia color, that's the door, which was defined in the door menu. If we go slightly below the door menu, you'll see what's called the Properties menu. And I'm going to click this little jump out button and make my Properties menu jump out so you can see it a little more. The Properties menu is where you change a lot of features of objects. I've clicked on an object just by using my cursor, and it tells me information about it. Okay, right now it kind of filters it. You can have it tell you absolutely every piece of information that it knows about it. It's geometry, starting X, starting Y. You'll notice there actually is a starting Z value. Don't mess with the Z value. There's other things you can change. Usually line weights, line types, and line type scales are all set by layer. And what that means is if the door layer is set to have a heavy line weight, then whatever line I draw on that layer will have that heavy line weight as well. Anyway, I'm going to snap that menu back in. You see how it's a little difficult to see the joint between the two layers. That's why I snapped. Finally, down here at the bottom of your screen are a number of important what are called drawing modes. And there's a scale, which defines the size of text and dimensions that you use. There's a readout of where my cursor is, which is very precise, accurate to the nearest 16th is how it's set. And then a number of different modes that will force your cursor to operate in very specific ways. For example, if I click this ortho mode, or Command L on a Mac, now when I draw a line, and I'm just going to type the word L, and then you see how it brings up a list of commands that begin with L. I'll type in line, or click on line. Now when I draw a line, no matter how hard I try, I can't draw it at a funny angle, whereas I'm going to turn off ortho mode, and now I can draw at any angle. You see how the line is unconstrained. Anyway, so drawing modes are very important. You'll also see down here what is called the command line, and it even says type a command. And this is actually kind of a relic from the old days of AutoCAD, where everything was typed in. There wasn't really much of a visual interface. There weren't buttons everywhere. Or if there were buttons, they were on a special drafting pad. Okay, and then down here at the very bottom on the left, you'll see a couple of tabs. These are tabs set up from our project. The model is what refers to model space. And if I zoom out here, this area where it's sort of black, and you can see your colors very dramatically, this is model space. And this is where pretty much almost all the drawing happens, except for certain kinds of sheet graphics. These other tabs, I'll just click on the first one here. This is what's called paper space. And you can see how it's white, like a white piece of paper. And all the lines have turned to just black lines. And there's this is where you can set your drawings to scale. This is actually a 24 by 36 sheet, which is configured to print using a title block. All of these have different configurations. This one is a little smaller. Okay, so that's the basics of the Mac interface. So this is the Windows version of AutoCAD. And what you'll see, first of all, the most noticeable thing is that there's no buttons over here on the left. They're all up here at the top. They're still organized in basically the same way. You have drawing tools. The trick here is that some of them are not visible unless you click the little down arrow, and you'll see some of the kind of extras there. But basically, the panel organization is pretty much the same. Any command can still be activated by clicking a button, by finding it somewhere in the toolbar menu, or by just typing it in. And again, I honestly think that typing it in is the best way to go. It still also has this main drawing area, the black drawing area, and the command line here in the center. You'll also see down on the lower left here that there is the model tab along with your layout tabs, which are model space and paper space. You also have your drawing modes down here. Interestingly enough, one that does not show up on your list of drawing modes is the line weight one. I don't quite know why that's the default on the PC version to not show the line weight button, but there it is. I just turned it on and now we can toggle back and forth. The other thing that you don't see by default, and again, I don't know why this is you don't see the layer menu. If I type in the word layer, this is the PC version, the Windows version of the layer menu. And you can see it's basically the same as the Mac version. The only trick is that this one has titles at the top of the columns, which actually I find really handy. And again, why don't they do that on all of them? I don't know. But basically, this is the same buttons. You can add and hide layers. You can also minimize it to a bar. If you click the auto hide button, this is a unique feature to the PC. Now when I mouse over it, the menu pops up, but when I go off of it, the menu goes away. I'll just drag that over here. Okay. You can also dock these menus by just dragging them up against the side of your menu, of your view space, and then move your mouse over the edge of them to expand or contract the size of the box. The same with the properties menu. If I select some object and I right click on it, the properties menu is not visible by default. But again, like I did before, I can either dock it on the side of my screen, or I can drag the menu off to the side here and have it either auto hide or not. And other than that, the menu items are totally dependent on the object selected, just like in the Mac version. Finally, you'll find that the PC version does have a few things that are visible that are not. These are kind of 3D controls. And if for whatever reason you've installed AutoCAD architecture and not just AutoCAD, that's only available on the Windows side, but AutoCAD architecture will have a number of additional features that are quite advanced. If you do find that you're doing construction drawings in, say, an office, then it's probably worth getting AutoCAD architecture. Again, they're both free from Autodesk using your Autodesk login. Okay, so let's actually start drawing. The first thing that you need to know when you're drawing is that it's important to zoom in and out on the area that you want to draw in, just so you can have a better view. It's just much easier to make editing commands. The simplest way to zoom in and out is if you have a scroll wheel on your mouse. Now, I can't show you that, but I will show you what it looks like when I scroll. Look, scrolling. Just scrolling in and out zooms you in and out. That's the term. And if you click and drag the mouse scroll wheel, you get a little hand that shows up on your screen, and it's almost like you're having a hand pressed down on a piece of paper, sliding it back and forth on the paper. So that's panning and zooming. If you don't have those, you can use your touchpad on a Mac or PC. Each laptop, if you're on a laptop, will behave slightly differently. And you can also type in the word. So I'm going to type in zoom, or I could just type in Z and see how zoom comes the top option. Hit enter, and then there are a number of different zoom options down here. And this is kind of what I would call the primary concepts here in AutoCAD. This is one of the first ones, which is that every command, when you type it in, they have these options down at the bottom. Now, in this one, right now, my cursor is giving me a tooltip, which says specify corner of window. So this allows me to draw a window, and when I click again, it will zoom in on that area. If I want to use another zoom command, I can type in zoom again, or I can just hit enter. Hitting enter makes the last command come back to life. And now, let's say I want to do another zoom command. Maybe I just want to see what's in this sheet. I can zoom extents. That's another one. All I have to do is type in E and enter, and AutoCAD knows, oh, that's that zoom extents command. Let's talk about a couple of basic drawing tools. And as a kind of ruse to get you to draw something, let's pretend we're going to draw like a carpet for this area here. There are a number of basic drawing tools, and you guessed it, they're up here in the Draw palette. And obviously AutoCAD makes them look kind of like what they are supposed to be. I'm going to click on this one here. It's called rectangle, and it looks like a rectangle. And if you look at the tiny little blue dots, the blue dots actually indicate how you draw this. You click once to draw one corner of the rectangle and click again to draw the other end. So I'm just going to click once to start the rectangle, and then I can click again to finish it. Now, if I wanted to draw a circle, a round carpet, again, I can just click on the circle, and you can see the icon indicates how it should be drawn. Just click once and draw again. All right, I'm not going to have a circle. So let's say I draw something and I don't want it. I want it to go away. The way AutoCAD works is that you can click on an object, and there are a number of things that you can do to that object. And maybe I'm just going to make this circle part of my pattern in my carpet. If I click on the little blue grips, and you can see here these little blue dots show up at various key points. Those are called grips. And if I click on the grip, and the terminology is making the grip hot, and you can see it's actually red to indicate that it's hot. I can move the object. Clicking the center grip moves the center of it. Clicking one of the side grips moves the kind of radius points. Each of the radius points is equal in a circle, so I can move any of those. So that's grip editing. And all sorts of objects have grips. I'm going to zoom in on this carpet so I can really get into the details here. Other objects have grips. Let me show you a line. And again, I can just click on the line tool, and I'm going to create my little pattern. Now, right now, I've left myself in this ortho mode from my previous demo, so I'm going to just turn off ortho mode. Again, these drawing modes down here, if they are kind of solid colored, they are depressed, which means not that they're sad, but just that they are activated. So now when I draw a line, you can see that it allows me to draw in any direction. Now, a few bits of terminology while we're drawing our line. The white line that is attached to my cursor, that is called a rubber band line. Okay, so as I draw lines, I can get rubber banding. The tool tips that pop up are called the polar tracking. And if you can see here, it says 5 foot 5 and 3/8 inches. That polar tracking number, see how it's highlighted? I can type in a number, 6 feet, for example, and when I hit enter, it will draw the line in that direction and in that dimension. Okay, so let's say I'm heading off at some random angle here, and I only want the line to be 2 feet, but I do want it to be 59 degrees. I can just type in 2 feet and enter, and it goes. You can also type in dimensions in inches, 24, and all dimensions in AutoCAD are defaulted to inches unless you change that. You can also hit tab, and it will jump to the next polar tracking readout, which is 60 degrees, and maybe I only want this to be 45, and I can force it to do that. So I'm just going to hit escape to end the tool. And escape is the kind of universal way to end whatever's going on. I could also click on another tool, and that will also end the tool. So you can see we're starting to come up with a very interesting pattern here. There are quite a few other drawing tools. I'm not going to cover every single one. What I'd like you to do as you create your own custom pattern is to experiment with them, be creative, and my advice is maybe make your way straight down the line. The last two I will show you is one's called a polyline, and what that is, when I draw this line, and I'll just draw, I don't know, a zigzag, I'll hit escape to end the polyline. When I click this tool, it is one object. Each part of the object has its own grips. So there's a bar grip that allows you to move the whole object, and one grip at the endpoints, the intersections, which allow you to change that. And you see how both segments change when I use a polyline. When you do that with regular lines, and nothing happens to the other one. They're not connected. And you can connect a series of lines using the polyline edit tool and make them into a polyline. You can also explode a polyline so that it's multiple lines. The other thing I wanted to show you is that many tools have kind of hidden underneath them other tools. There's a little teeny tiny arrow on the lower right of this tool. If I click and drag that arrow, you'll see that there's both a rectangle and a polygon hidden under there. Again, I could just type in the command, but I'm going to show you in this first lesson button and what it looks like. I find it's helpful to see how they work. Anyway, a polygon, you can tell it how many sides. Let's say I want an octagon. I can just type in 8 and hit enter. You do have to remember to hit enter because it's asking for that piece of information. Anyway, and then I can draw my octagon, and here we go. Oh, it's giving me another option, inscribed in a circle or circumscribed about a circle. Well, let's go with in a circle. It just depends how you're going to draw it. Finally, you can define how big the object is just by dragging your cursor and clicking to end it. I will mention also that you see how my cursor is giving me this tip. It says specify radius of circle. It also says this down in on your command line. So if you're kind of lost and you're like, what's the computer waiting for? Sometimes you may have accidentally turned off your tooltips. Looking down at the command line will tell you what AutoCAD is waiting for. All right, so those are your basic drawing commands. Let's take a look at some of the editing commands. Now, in AutoCAD speak, those are called modify. And again, there are quite a few tools. I'm not going to cover every single one, but there are an awful lot of fun things that you can do with the modify commands. Now, first of all, we learned the most basic modify command, which is grip editing. And grip editing has the advantage of you can kind of select everything and you can start fiddling around with objects without having to kind of select each one. Now, if you want to select objects to modify more precisely, let's say I want to move a couple of objects. All you have to do is click on an object. And if you want to add another object, you don't have to hold anything down. You just click on another object and you see how they both can become highlighted. And there's really no restriction on which objects can be put into this selection set. Then once you have them selected, you can click on a command. So for example, if I click the move command, I'll just click the move command. Now AutoCAD is asking me specify base point. Now, the way a lot of commands work is you have a base point, which is the first point of displacement, basically. I'll click to define that, and that's how AutoCAD knows where to start the move command. And now it's just like we were drawing before. You just click a second time to enter the location, the second point of displacement. If you want to copy those objects, another thing you can do is you can click on the tool first and then select objects. There are also some commands which allow you to have recall of selection sets. If I type in P for previous, it will call back my previous selection. Okay, and I can add to that in addition. Anyway, don't forget, when you are done building your selection set, you have to hit enter. See how my cursor is saying keep selecting? Come on, I'm waiting for more objects. Just hit enter and it will be done. Now you can specify a base point. Now, some people will specify a base point on an object if you want to move something precisely. So for example, if I click on this endpoint here, I can copy all of these objects by that endpoint, just dragging them over. Now, AutoCAD likes to copy, so I can just keep copying and make lots and lots of copies. And you can get pretty quickly a kind of very interesting and maybe slightly disturbing pattern. So maybe you want to not have quite such an irregular and chaotic pattern. Maybe you want something a little more regular. First of all, you can undo things. Isn't that nice? We love undo. Command U undoes. Also, Command Z does the same thing. I'm just going to hit that a bunch of times to get me back to where we were. When you are copying objects, to reiterate the syntax, I can click the copy command first, or I can select objects first. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to click copy first, and let's just select this one object. And I'll give it a base point. Now, you see that little green dot that pops up and says endpoint? Okay, and there are a number of different green dots that pop up. That is called an O-snap, O-S-N-A-P, object snap. And there are a number of different geometric points. For example, this midpoint usually shows up. Even the centers of circles show up. See how as I move my mouse over the edge of the circle, the center shows up. Object snaps are really handy. Let's say I wanted to copy this object and put one on each of these endpoints of this polyline. I could use that object snap to help me out. Now, in this case, let me undo. I don't really want those. I just want an irregular pattern, and I don't want to use all those object snaps. I'm going to come down here and look at my drawing modes menu, and there is a button which allows me to turn on and off object snap. So if I turn that off, now when I move my mouse over endpoints, I don't see anything. It basically ignores whether or not that's an endpoint. And now I can just start clicking and placing a bunch of these objects, okay? And you can see how you can get a very more recognizable pattern doing that, as opposed to when I turn object snap back on, and I get these geometric locations, intersection and whatnot. Now you might be saying, what other object snaps are there? Well, you can use what's called a temporary O-snap. You just hold down the Shift key and right-click, and a menu of all available O-snaps pops up. And you can use any of these that you want, and it overrides all of the others. So I'm going to choose Nearest. And now you see how my cursor has a little green, I don't even know what you'd call that, Nearest icon. And now I can just click on that object. And the temporary O-snap only works for that one instance.
So running O-snaps can be also very handy. If you just right-click on the O-snap button, then what you'll see, that same list pops up. But now if you check off, say, Nearest, it will be enabled for continuously. It won't go away after a single instance.
Now, another thing that you can do is if you want to use a command like, say, rotate, maybe I like all these lines, but I want to rotate them around at an angle. First of all, to select these objects, so far I've really just talked about but not shown you explicitly other ways to select things besides just clicking on an object. Sometimes you want to select a large number of objects. AutoCAD offers two ways to do that. One is called a crossing window. With nothing selected and no command active, I click once, but I don't click and drag. I just click, and you see how I get this green box with dashed lines on the edge? That is called a crossing window. Anything that is touched will get selected. And you can see that as I move over objects, they get highlighted as they get selected. So for example, let's say I want to select all these lines. The easiest way to do it is to use this crossing window. And if I want to move or rotate them, all I have to do, I could click on the rotate command, but I can also just right-click on these objects. And this is called a context menu or context sensitive menu, and AutoCAD has all of the basic commands that people use very frequently in this menu. So I can just choose rotate here. Either one will work, and it doesn't matter, it's the same command if you click on the button, type in rotate, or just use the context menu. So now with the rotate command, I can just give it a base point and spin the objects around. What if I want some objects, but I don't want this circle, but I do want these lines? I can use another kind of window to select, and this one is called a selection window. And to differentiate it, see how this is green and dashed with a dashed border. This one is blue and solid. Now, only objects with which fall entirely inside the window are selected. And you can see how they get highlighted, but this long line is not highlighted. The circle is not highlighted. Whereas if I go the other direction, all I have to do is cross the circle and it gets selected. So now once I have those objects, I can do any command that I want. So let's try scale. That's always a good one. Scale actually is a complicated tool. You have to give it a base point and then specify how big you want it to go. Now you see how quickly this thing gets large by just dragging my mouse. This one is a nice one to type in a value. I'm just going to type in, say, 1.2. You see how that shows up in my smart cursor, and hit enter, and it will scale them by essentially 1.2 or 120%. One last editing tool of many that we can use that's kind of fun is the offset tool. If you take a look with your good eyesight at what that tool looks like, it basically creates a copy of an object some distance apart. Now, the way that works, I can click on the button. I could also just type in offset. First asks you what distance do you want to offset. So maybe I'll just go with 2 inches. I don't even need to type in inches. I'll just hit enter. Now it says what object you want to offset. So I'll click this object, and you see how it gives me a preview depending on where my mouse is, either inside or outside. And then it makes a copy of the object outside, in this case, when I click outside the object. And I can keep going here, clicking on the object, and you can create a concentric ring. And again, a lot of people like the look of that. And it doesn't have to be a round object. It can be a straight object if you wanted to, say, create walls or just fun patterns. All right. If you want to change the offset dimension, just hit escape or enter to exit the command. Hit enter again to start the command again, and it asks you to specify the distance again. So now I could type in, I don't know, let's go with 1 inch. And get a nice bunch of lines that way. Now, I don't like this yucky lines going over the edge of my pretty carpet. There is a way to trim those away, and using the word trim actually is a key. The command is trim. So I'm going to hit escape and type in the word trim. I will show you here the trim command looks suspiciously like scissors. So the trim command, there are 2 parts to it, and it's quite a few tools work this way. In this case, there are the trimmers and the trim-e's. So the first thing it wants you to do is select the objects that are going to do the cutting, do the trimming. I'm going to click this box. Now, like other commands, it wants you to continue selecting. So remember that if you're like, hey, nothing's trimming, it's because it's still selecting trimmers. You have to hit enter. And obviously I can't show you me hitting enter on the screen, but I just did it, tried to do it as loud as I could. Now it says select objects to trim, and you can just click on an object, and away it goes. Isn't that fun? You can also click across several objects, and it will trim them all at once, okay? And you can try and be as precise as possible. And this is where zooming in and out kind of helps. See how I can zoom in here and really get a good sense. And AutoCAD gives you a highlight of what's going to get trimmed so that you can do it quite effectively. All right. Oh, there's a few little stragglers right there. This is where zooming way in helps me to see which objects are kind of the offending objects. There we go. Now I've got a much nicer carpet that I can work with.
Lastly, I think I will make a little border around my carpet just using the offset command. And maybe I'll offset it by 3. I think that'll make it look a little more finished.
So what I would like everyone to do is to try to create a carpet with lots of patterns of at least 4 different kinds of objects. In this case, I demonstrated circles, lines, polygons, and ellipses, but there are many other tools that you can fiddle around with. Some are quite fun, like spline, and can be really interesting.